All right, welcome to Checkmate with the OCAP Master. I'm joined here today with a very special guest, Valera, who is a Fulbright scholar, and she has a great story for us today. And hopefully, those of you guys interested or haven't heard about the Fulbright can learn a little bit more about it, and we can, add more information and value to you as we move forward regarding this program, how to apply, and what it takes to essentially succeed with this uh, um, scholarship. And so the first thing that I want to ask Blair to do is introduce herself, and then we'll go ahead and open up the questions.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share a little pieces of my Fulbright story that I hope can help anyone listening. I'm Vlera. I'm from Kosovo, Pristina. I was born here and I live here. I'm a Fulbright scholar. I studied in the US for a year. I studied law, more specifically alternative dispute resolution and contract law. It was a mix of classes. And now I'm working here. I have a full-time job at an NGO as a researcher and legal officer, and two other part-time jobs as legal analyst and project coordinator. So,
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about the Fulbright, Valera. How did you hear about it? What
mm,
is it? How competitive is it? Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, Fulbright is widely known for its prestige. It's jointly funded by the U.S. Department of State and foreign governments, and awards are provided each year to around 8,000 plus students, scholars, and other professionals in the US, and I think in around 140 to 160 countries in the world. I heard about it from a very young age, but I think I started to learn more about it during the first year of law school. I had always wanted to study in the US, and I started researching very early on about opportunities in Kosovo for scholarships and what would it take in terms of GPA and extracurriculars. And I'm not gonna lie, Fulbright obviously intimidated me at the time. I remember reading that from thousands of applicants, only 20% of them would be awarded and stuff like that. But I decided to just, keep that goal in the back of my head, and kind of whatever I did throughout law school was with that goal in the back of my head. I don't think I ever said it out loud to my family or my friends until after law school. But I think as years passed by, the goal started to get clearer to me because it wasn't just about studying in the US anymore, what I knew from books and movies and all that, but I just knew at one point that I really wanted to learn more and do something impactful with my career, and I believe Fulbright would be a great step towards that, you know.
Yeah, and so the podcast that we're on right now is targeting essentially undergrad students. So it's giving them essentially time to
Mm,
figure out this scholarship and the process. I think that's super
mm,
important because you mentioned you knew about it for a while, and that way
mhm.
you essentially prepared yourself for it mentally, and you was something that you were really interested in doing. And so the question that I have for you is, how intentional was it? Like, how much thought did you have to put in, and how long were you preparing to apply?
Um, well, it actually took a while. I mean, I was doing my internship at the Court of Appeals, and I really wanted to do my master's as soon as possible. It was right after I finished law school. But I, with years, I started to get more pragmatic about the possibility of not winning a Fulbright scholar, no matter how much I wanted it in the years during law school. So I decided to check other scholarship opportunities as well. But thankfully now, nothing like some scholarships that usually are funded every year, for some reasons, were not funded that year. So I decided directly to Fulbright. It was the first scholarship that I applied to. And to be honest, I had a little bit of like doubt because it was the first time I was applying for a scholarship and it was Fulbright. But
Mhm.
I decided to go with it. I think even previous experiences like the MUN and other competitions on arbitration and stuff like that, that I had the chance to be part of bigger things, kind of like enabled to let that to not let that little fear of this scholarship being too big for me get in the way of submitting a good application and all that. So anyway, I decided to apply, but it was during quarantine. That's what made it more challenging. It was actually the beginning of COVID, and um, yeah, nobody really knew what was going on and how life was unfolding. So answering questions in the application like, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, or what are your long-term plans, were not very easy to answer at that time.
Yeah. And they
Uh,
like really like they like that vision. They really need that.
mhm,
And so
yeah.
it's a while to
And I'll
develop.
get to there in a second because I didn't really understand it then, the purpose of that question. But then it just felt it put a lot of pressure in me mentally and emotionally, especially with everything going on with the whole isolation situation. So it took really weeks for me to finish the essays, despite the plenty free time that I had in my hands, during quarantine and all that. But anyway, it took a while to write the essays. Everything else is pretty technical,
Mhm.
with other documents that you have to submit and all that. But just you have to do a lot. You either have to get in touch with people, with former Fulbrighters to give you some tips and advice on the essays, or have someone mentoring you, or do a lot of research online about what other Fulbrighters had to say online about what worked and what didn't, because it's just they receive so many applications in a year, so it's really hard to know how to stand out with your essays. But anyway, yeah, I submitted my application so it started in May, and then by the end of May, I had submitted my application. And usually you hear back around, I don't know, June. But then it was almost August and I didn't hear anything back. And I thought I didn't get it. So I started working at this law firm. But apparently it was only because of delays due to COVID and all that. And then I heard back in October that I was invited for an interview. So after a couple of months, they tell you that you're invited to an interview. Um, and a funny story, I I had to choose between continuing work at the law firm and rejecting the interview, or accepting the invitation to an interview and losing my job, which I had just started.
Yeah,
So
and the interview is not guaranteed that you'll even get the program. So
exactly. It was a crazy situation. Long story. So I don't want to get into the details of it, but it was a crazy moment to be at because Fulbright is what I've always wanted, obviously. But then I had this job that I also always wanted. There was this law firm that I always wanted to work at. And people were telling me, even former professors, that look, it might be too early, you might be too young, and it's not worth it to lose this job. You can try later. But I don't know, nothing really convinced me because, I got that close to what I always wanted, and I just thought I should take a risk and go with it. And I did. I went to the interview and I was awarded the scholarship, and I ended up not losing my job. So risking it works sometimes.
that's
Um,
saying that you took that big of a risk and it paid off. And so I think sometimes you
yeah,
have to do that. If I can
yeah,
back
exactly.
a bit and talk about belief, right? And so,
Hmm.
say this to the top athletes that you have to really visualize being able to win at that top level. So, whether it's
Hmm.
in tennis, soccer, basketball, you have to really believe that it's possible. And I think
Hmm.
students face two barriers when it comes to prestigious awards, or even going into the top law school, med school, dental, whatever, the top programs. They face two big barriers that they have to overcome at some point, whether the
Hmm.
environment helps them overcome that or they themselves take the initiative to help to overcome that. The two barriers are essentially number one, knowing about the thing in the first place. How many people
Hmm.
did about the Fulbright? I had no idea about the
Hmm.
Fulbright. Maybe up until my senior year in undergrad, I had no idea that it existed.
Hmm.
So a lot of people don't know about these prestigious scholarships and opportunities. And the second thing is the belief that it's possible. Even if I
Hmm.
hadn't about Fulbright, I think as an undergrad, I would have been like, no way, that's not for me.
Hmm.
That's for some godlike person who has the abilities far beyond me, and they're killing it in every aspect of their life. It's just
Hmm.
not possible for me. So talk a little bit about that. I know you kind of
Hmm.
didn't tell anybody about it, even though you applied.
Hmm.
But what made you believe? Like, was there a point that helped you with the confidence? Was maybe you
Hmm.
heard people talk about it? They said they weren't that special, and they got not that you're
Hmm.
not special, but they kind of humanized it for you, made you
Yeah.
feel that it was like possible.
Yeah. To be honest, there was this one experience that enabled me to kind of believe more that you can be part of bigger things that can seem intimidating and even impossible at first sight. And that was this one competition in Vienna. It's the largest competition in the world in international trade and arbitration. And I participated in it as part of the team from University of Pristina. And it took a lot of work. We worked for 8 months straight. It was very intense on top of all the classes and everything. And we had limited resources to materials and books and cases in comparison to other universities in the world. And so it was very, very challenging. And then we ended up, when we went to the oral arguments in Vienna, we ended up achieving higher scores that many prestigious universities, including Harvard and Yale. And that's made me think that, okay, wait, I come from this small country with limited resources. This seemed impossible if you'd asked me like a couple of years ago, but here I am. And I feel pretty confident in my skills and my potential. I didn't feel intimidated at all from that setting of all these people from all around the world, all the students from these great big universities and all that. And then I was like, okay, I will go on and, check out as many opportunities, similar opportunities that are big and that I'm sure I can make it. And I think that was a very great push for me in my career and personally as well, just to be more aware of my potential and my skills. And yeah, but as I said,
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish out that thought.
No, I just wanted to say, as I said before, in the beginning, then I started to believe that, okay, yeah, really, I can do this. I have to apply to Fulbright. But then I started to get a little bit more pragmatic on the chances of not winning and then checking other scholarship opportunities. Because at first I was like, okay, I'm not going to try anything else. Fulbright is what I want, and that's it. But yeah, but you need something in your life, some experience that is key to you really believing that you can go further than that, further than you thought you could.
And this is why, they say environment is everything. Just by putting yourself around those students who are from Harvard and Yale, you saw that they weren't necessarily, it's not that they're not that phenomenal. It's that you realize that they're human. They're all like,
yeah, exactly. As you said, you humanize them.
Exactly. You have the same amount of time. You're essentially working towards the same goals. And so it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to kind of put yourself in that space long enough where it becomes less of a Herculean act. That's the first thing. The second,
exactly.
You mentioned something. You said that one experience gave you the ability and the confidence to apply and actually re-question your potential. There's this book called The Winner Effect, and it talks about how athletes, when they're playing, for instance, soccer, and they score a goal, the team scores, right? What happens is they get this rush of an adrenaline, and basically their physiology itself fundamentally changes, and they get a little bit more bold, a little bit more confidence. And so one of the things I always tell students is winning is essentially kind of like a stair step. You got to find smaller victories, and those smaller victories essentially will open up the doors to the next possible victory. If you essentially take loss after loss, what's going to happen is your physiology, your confidence will change. Imagine if you had lost that by a mile. Like, let's say you guys were worst team, whatever. I think it's shaking you to the point where you may not have even considered applying. And so that's really key for students to recognize that winning leads to more winning, and losing I'm talking about on a physiological level, the way your body reacts, its confidence, it leads to more losing. And I think this might have been the case with you. It's just that win gave you the boldness, the confidence, the self-belief to even take risks like you did with, the interview coming up, and having already a perfect job lined up, and then wanting this and shooting for it. It came from, confidence of previous experiences. So stacking that is super important for students to, you really want to draw on past successes, and then you want to put yourself in places to do that. And so the next question that I have for you is, did anybody help you applying, or was it just you yourself?
I mean, it was quarantine, so it was difficult to reach out to people at the time to help you with something like that, as everyone was fighting with their lives. So not really. I didn't have anyone mentoring me directly, but I did reach out to former Fulbrighters from here in Kosovo just to get some tips and advice. And I researched a lot about what other Fulbrighters had to say online about what worked, what didn't. So many things that at some point I didn't really know what to write anymore. And I stumbled so much upon the word, unique about, for the story that you share in the essays and all that, that it just puts so much pressure in you on how to be unique. What makes you more unique than the others? That was a critical question that was really, really hard to answer. But I researched a lot and I talked to some people that I knew, but that was that. Yeah.
And so one of the things we talked about in a previous podcast, I had an admissions consultant on, and I had a really awesome conversation with them. And they were talking about the importance of a story, that the story is
Yeah,
We've seen so
exactly.
many people without even the grades, the most
It really
competitive,
is everything.
but
Mm-hmm.
have a story that puts you in
Uh-huh.
good light and shows what attributes of yourself that are really strong is actually the most important thing.
Mm,
I read applications all the time, and I see students with amazing extracurriculars. Like I'm like, wow, they're part of this, they were part of that, and then the
mm,
S completely falls short. It's not
mm-hmm.
even near what they could have written about with all the
Mm,
things they had worked on. And I think people don't realize that story writing is an essential skill. And I tell students, I think you should be applying for the best scholarships, not even to try to get them necessarily. Obviously, shoot for it, but
oh
the
yeah.
idea of practicing how to tell your story and set yourself up is going to make you a better, physician. It's going to make you a better lawyer. It's going to make you a better dentist, whatever, because then you market yourself in a way
Mm,
that gives you a competitive edge because you're being 100% yourself.
mm,
Nobody can replicate Vlera. Nobody can replicate
yeah.
who you are. And so tapping into the experiences that shaped you is super important. I tell students all the time, I say, write a story log, all of the logs of the stories that happened in your life from when you were a kid, when you were in middle school, high school. Think
Mm,
back, spend some time writing all of these stories out so that way you have something to draw on. Even if you
mm,
don't use them, you start to shape a narrative together to
mm.
figure out what experiences really shaped you more than anything
Yeah.
else.
No. Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
was that a transformative process for you? I mean, after getting the story together, did you feel like you had a better sense of purpose than before when
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have that story put together?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to say, it's when I decided to apply for Fulbright. Of course, I wanted to win it, and that was my ultimate goal. But also, I was like, even if I don't win this, I'm just starting to reflect on all these questions and starting to know how to write my story and how to write these essays, and that will be helpful for maybe other scholarships if I don't get this one or later for Fulbright. So, um, and yes, I think I had realized I focused so much on the technical criteria, like the GPA and extracurriculars, and did not realize the significance of the story that I chose to share, and especially the uniqueness of it. But then, as I said, stumbling so much into the word unique, I that that became my goal. But I think the goal should be genuinity. You just need to share your own story in your own way, and then uniqueness, it's how it's perceived, how you choose your story, how you choose to present your story, and how to engage the people reading it with it. It took quite some reflection. Actually, I reflected so much on who I was when I started law school, what were some key experiences in my life that made me the person that I was then, why I believed in what I believed in, and why I wanted to do this. I think just when you know what you want to study and why you want to do it, just what you realistically expect of yourself in the future. These are two very important questions that you should know before starting to write your story and just telling why you want this. What do you expect to achieve with this? So yeah, it was a transformative person in a personal level. I mean, story in a personal level. So. And I think it's because it's difficult to judge what stories are better or more unique than the others. So it's just about how you choose to present your story and engage the people with it.
Yeah. Did you have people editing it at the very least just to like see if the thing, your story flowed well or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that? Or did you significantly do it from start to finish on your own?
Mm-hmm. I sent it to a former professor of mine just to check it out that I was closer to during law school, and then a couple of friends just to see how they're perceiving it and all that. So yeah, that was really really helpful.
Okay. And then I'm looking here and I'm seeing like all of the past Fulbright scholars. It says 39 heads of state or government were Fulbright scholars, 60 Nobel Prize laureates, 75 Arthur Foundation Fellows,
Mm-hmm.
88 Pulitzer Prize recipients. So definitely the prestige there is insane. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
prestige in and of itself can open doors for you. And so how did the doors open once you became a Fulbright scholar? Did you notice a significant difference in career, in, connections, networking, all of that stuff?
Mm. People expect you to be very smart.
Yeah.
As soon as you say a Fulbrighter, the expectations are high. But no, yeah, definitely. I mean, you're just perceived differently. The expectations are different. You have a lot to prove as well. But also, it's just a good way for people to take you into consideration more easily. And Fulbright definitely impacted my life and my future immensely. Again, both in professional and personal levels, because it's just a process, the whole experience, starting from the application and then the whole experience in a different country. It teaches you a lot about whatever you're studying, and then life and opportunities in the world. For me, for example, the program in the University of Pristina was more general when it comes to law. So it was really nice to have the chance to choose specific classes on what I wanted to learn. And then professors were truly inspiring, and settings like networking events with people from all over the world were just a great opportunity to keep in contact with people in the future for whatever you needed in terms of your career. And also, it was important for me to also be part of other activities as well. In addition to classes, I participated in competitions on negotiations and investment arbitration, and then I had the chance to serve as a mediator at court as part of a mediation clinic, and I came back home feeling just enriched and even more eager to explore opportunities. But one thing I want to note, Ahmad, that was really interesting, I think, when I before I started, I thought that this 1 year and this whole Fulbright thing would really help me determine the exact direction that I would choose for my career path. I thought that would be it. I would come back really sure of what I want to do. But it didn't exactly happen like that. It was a little bit more blurry after I came back, because I just think during that whole experience, I learned so much about what my potential, what I could do, and what opportunities are there in the world for me to do what I want. That there was so much more to choose from, which can be you can feel a little bit lost in one sense, but at the end of the day, it's a good thing, I think, because there's a lot to choose from. You can do much more than you thought you can, and that was a really good thing to come back with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so it becomes very exciting still that it doesn't limit your world. I mean, it doesn't, you said it didn't give you like a specific purpose that now
Mm-hmm.
you've figured it all out.
Yeah.
Still discovering it. I think that makes things exciting.
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
if it had been where like, okay, you're a Fulbright now, you have to commit to this research for the rest of
Exactly.
your life, it would have been miserable. The other thing that you
Mm.
mentioned that you touched on, I think everybody goes through this. So if you get into med school, if you get into law school, if you become a part of a prestigious scholarship or whatever, it's phenomenal because it does open doors, but then it also comes with its own challenges. Nothing is
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Anything in life has its pros and cons. And so you mentioned, people have this expectation of you before you walk into the room that you're brighter, that you're smarter, that you're this, that you're that. And a lot of times, what I've noticed is there's this, word called militant egalitarianism. But the idea is like people kind of want to if you show any weakness or if you show any like hint of imperfection, they want to kind of tear you down because you have achieved this whatever. So there is a trade-off to that. So if you become a doctor, go into med school, you go into a top program or a top scholarship. Again, you have to expect that there are going to be people who are kind of like, oh, this person got it, or oh, this person won it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I think it's just human nature to have that sense of envy, but you did touch upon it, I think, in another way where you said like they have these really high expectations, and if you don't live up, they'll kind of be like even more maybe cruel, or not cruel, but like more judgmental of you
Yeah.
if you slip up. So is that the case, that they're also harsher if you made a mistake a little bit?
Yeah, I would say so for sure. And in the beginning, it would put a little bit of pressure in me. Like I would start maybe even like feeling a little insecure of yourself, like, oh, now I have to know everything, and now I cannot show any hint of imperfection whatsoever. But then I just started to realize that it's always more about it's not about you not knowing enough. It's about people constantly trying to find something that would make them feel a little bit better about themselves. Oh, yeah, she's a Fulbright, but again, not that smart. It's about them consoling themselves. It's not about how much you actually know, and and of course, there are people that think that they're gonna know everything after studying a specific area after Fulbright, and that's just not the case. I never really had that in my mind that I have to come back knowing just absolutely everything. I'm still so eager to learn more and to get better. And I'm always very grateful when I'm surrounded by people that can tell me, hey, this is what you're doing. It's not okay. And you should do this better. And this is what you could improve. I'm always super open for that.
Yeah, and you mentioned something too that I want to flesh out. It's the idea of like, sometimes when you have a position, you have to live up to it. And so you spend
Mhm.
all your time kind of trying to live up to people's expectations and justify why you got it. That there's a trap in that. It's great, but there's also a drawback too, in the sense that now you're spending all your time justifying instead of genuinely pursuing passion
Mm,
pursuits, right? And
mhm.
so you have to avoid that trap as well, because people have these
For
expectations that
sure.
are phenomenal and you're going to do great things. Look, there's 39 heads of state. Valera is going to be the next
Mm,
president, whatever, right? But
yeah.
um, the reality is like you have to step back and recognize
Uh,
that that's crap. If you fall down that road, what's going to happen is you're going to spend all your time trying to justify your position and not
mm,
actually genuinely doing the work that you are called
yeah.
to, inspired by. And so, did
Mm,
you avoid? Are you thinking about
yeah.
avoiding crap? Is that something
Uh,
you thought?
Yeah, yeah. What I like to do in conversations like that, Omar, sometimes is instead of trying to make it into this competition of, oh no, I know so much more than you do, and I know everything, and just having that pressure. I like to go with, yeah, I don't know much about this. Please tell me more, and just like make it more engaging and let them know that kind of humanizing people who also want these prestigious scholarships, and still creating this sense of community, and we're all together working and trying to get better and inspiring each other to do more. And I think that kind of turns the conversation into a whole other thing. Then it's not so much more about, oh, let's test this out. How much does she know and how much she doesn't? Because then it's just a conversation together. We're both at the same level, just talking, and exchanging ideas and all that. So I think that works in most cases.
And curiosity will always get you far. I mean, people love to be able to teach, and so you having that
Mm.
attitude, I just want to learn. This
Yeah,
award is
exactly.
everything. And that's, I think, one of the things that I really was hoping to impress upon students with this podcast was that essentially these prestigious awards are not the end all be all. You're dealing with human beings. Yes, it can open
Mm.
many doors for you, but the importance is, who you are, and again, learning
Mm.
constantly and trying to improve. And again, humanizing this award in the sense that, hey, it's possible for you to get it if you set your mind to it.
Yeah.
Write a really good story. If you work, the sky's the limit of possible. The next question that I have for you is, what advice would you give students interested in applying, and what things maybe they should avoid in the process?
Mm. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna touch upon some things that we already mentioned, but just in more detail. Like when it comes to the application process, especially when writing the essays, as I said, just don't try too hard to sound more special than the others, because that will be reflected and in the essay, and it comes out as ingenuine. Will not allow the people reading it to truly gain insight into who you are and what your goals are. And then the second thing that we mentioned before about the question of where you want to be in 5 to 10 years, that's the question that you're asked about in an interview as well. And it's just all over the application process. I just want to know where you see yourself. And I didn't understand it then myself either, but looking retrospectively at it, I think the idea behind the question is not for us to be 100% sure of where we're going to be after those years, because that would be unrealistic. But I think the purpose is to see if I have a clear idea of what I want to study and why. So I would make sure that you start the process being sure of those two questions, and then based on those kind of build up a realistic expectation that you have for yourself with regards to the future, that you have a purpose. And lastly, I think, and this goes for after the application process, for after being awarded, it is important to prepare yourself for a very hectic experience with a lot of new things happening at once. And as great as it is, it can be overwhelming for some more than the others. But putting yourself out there in classes, networking events, social gatherings, parties, events, football games, I don't know, meeting new people, trying new food, everything is important in its own way, and it's fulfilling. So take in as much as what the program and the whole experience offers, I would say.
Yeah, and I thought about something while you were, sharing that, the idea of like having to think about your 5 to 10 year goals. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know which comes first, because there's a lot of research that shows if you sit down and really critically self-reflect about what your strengths are, your past,
Mm-hmm.
then your 5 to 10 years in the future of the goals that you want, even if we're not talking about the scholarship, it shows that there's a lot more essentially chance of success at whatever it is you're trying to achieve, because you've given the time to think about where it is that you want to be, what you want to make of
Mm-hmm.
it, what you want to do with your life. And so I wonder, how much is that process alone a self-fulfilling process, that you sat
Mm-hmm.
down, really gave some critical thought to becoming, Fulbright, and
Mm-hmm.
then going on to do one, two, three, four, five,
Mm-hmm.
in the legal field or whatever. How much of that really was the impetus for you to become, rise to the Fulbright kind of prestige, and actually make that possible? And so again, it's like almost like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, is the fact that you have to sit there and think very deeply and critically the self-fulfilling process that allows you to become that, or is it you become that, and then once you get the prestige and the title, then essentially you move on to bigger things, right? It's just a
Mm-hmm.
very curious kind of thing. It's like the process of applying itself can be very, very
Oh
rewarding,
yeah.
because it
Yeah,
creates a
for sure. No, it makes you think about things at a deeper level that you don't really think about. I mean, you think about what you'd like to, but as you said, not exactly just thinking about what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what would I like to do and why, what do I want to impact at the end of the day. It's not about like, oh, after 5 years I'm gonna have my own law firm and I'm gonna have this many employees and whatever. It's just about what do you see yourself in, what do you want to impact. And it's just I told you I took weeks to write the essays. I would write one sentence, delete it, think about it while sleeping, while eating, while it was a very, very intense process of just reflecting on myself, and not just on a professional level, but also as a person, what I wanted to do with my life and what I wanted to impact.
Was there anything that gave you, and we'll end on these last few questions, but was there anything that gave you structure in that self-critical evaluation? Anything that guided you on how to reflect? Was there like a book, a set of questions? Was the
Mm-hmm.
application itself the structure that
Mm-hmm.
you to think about? Was there any other resources that you used to really have that self-reflective experience?
Uh, as I said, like actual resources were limited during quarantine. It was just hard to find people who would mentor me and just, talk to them and discuss about it. I was isolated at home, beginning of quarantine, just, hearing the news about people dying. It was just, it's not that I could get a lot of help, but I think it just was going back and forth a lot with myself, just asking myself questions, starting to write, and then seeing that no, but that's not really what brought me here, and then deleting it and then starting again. I think at some point I just started writing, like whatever I could think about, just write, just put it there. And then I saw that there were some specific things that were like I was building up more on those, because subconsciously I knew those were the key things that I wanted to put, but I just didn't realize at the time. And then reading back on it, I was like, oh, that's really it. This is what I want to share. Um, and then because there are two essays that you write for Fulbright. One is personal statement that is more about them gaining insight into who you are and what you believe in, and then there is a study objective where you have to be very concrete about what you want to study. And that also was challenging to be that concrete, like to really think on the depths of it. What do you want to do? But yeah, I just think just going back and forth and asking yourself a lot of questions, just putting it there, and just it's a bit easy when for me there were so many things that I wanted to do. I was never a very, like, I have some friends that they knew they wanted to do energy law, for example, from the very beginning. For me, it wasn't really like that. There are so many dimensions to what I want to do in the future and all that. So I just wanted to find a way to kind of show why I want to do all of those things, something that encompasses all of those things that I wanted to do. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's not easy, but I think talking to people and just discussing with people, with your closed ones, with professors, with whoever that you think can help you or just listen to you. Sometimes you don't even need other people saying anything about, just talking about it, just really putting it there. It just helps you realize things.
No, 100%. I remember when I would apply for these types of like programs or grad school or whatever, I had a lot of golden nuggets of parts of me, but it was really, really hard to bring them all together. And so I think one of the things you mentioned was write down everything. And that was super helpful. I had lists upon lists of all of
Yes.
I made an Excel sheet.
It's a whole mess in the beginning. Like
so I had like, okay, I'll talk about my personal experiences past, my roots, my this, my that, and anything that came into my story or my life. And then even as an exercise today, I can go back and look at that and be like, wow, there's all these things that I did or was a part of or whatever. It's really, really almost inspiring that you maybe survived certain things or been through some experiences and learned really deeply. And so that's something that I always tell my students is you have to figure out your story, write down everything. There are a lot of bits, and maybe you use some and leave others. But when you have everything there, you'll start some sort of pattern, some sort of theme.
Oh
maybe
yeah, for sure.
Who is always helping others, an activist, an advocate. Maybe you're a person who's always looking for striving for excellence. You are the top of your school, you are the top of this, and maybe that means maybe you were highly competitive throughout everything that you did. All you cared about was competition. Maybe you were the type of person who was really like immersed in, experiences. You've been all over the place, and those experiences really change the way you see the world. So you start to see all the patterns of your life when you just write and write and write everything.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think, again, even if you're not serious about or you don't feel that this is something that is guaranteed for you, and I think nobody really felt that the Fulbright is
just the process.
Just the process is immensely valuable. And if you go down that road, you become better for it. And so that was my whole hope for this podcast. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I think our students are going to value a lot of what you said and your experience, and really a lot of insights there.
Me too. I really hope that it's helpful to anyone listening. And I just want to say that, of course, the process is maybe challenging and overwhelming from time to time. And I just want to say that it is okay to doubt it here and there. It's not realistic if somebody tells you that, oh, they know they're going to win it, oh, they know they want it. You can have doubts, and that's okay. But there is nothing to lose, really, in giving your best despite the chances you think you have in getting awarded. Once you know what you want and that you really want to go with it,
100%. I was actually just having this conversation with a friend the other day. Is we all often, many of us will do something and then we're really anxious about it. So maybe we'll talk bunch of jobs and we're really anxious about our application. But then there's another individual who might do the same applications, but when they have that anxiety or those emotions or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they basically be at peace with themselves and really
Mm-hmm.
put the outcome aside. They're like, the outcome is not in my hands. It's all
Yeah.
about the process, right? So the
Yeah.
same two people applying for the same jobs, one
Mm-hmm.
experiences a lot of like inner tension, stress, anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. The other person is doing the same actions, taking the same steps forward.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is exactly the same, but they're at peace with it because they realize the
Yeah.
outcome is, and I'm okay with doing
Mm.
the process. So you want to be the person who is at peace. So do your part, do the work, do
Exactly.
application, go through the process.
Exactly.
It's got its ups and downs. Yes, you'll have doubts, but the reality is put the doubts aside because the application is or the outcomes are not in your hand. Kobe Eagles like
Yeah.
Coach
Exactly.
said something very powerful on this. He's like, well, if I take the shot and I win, then we won the championship. Great. We still have to start the next day, do the same thing over again. We got to go practice. We got
Yeah.
to go to the gym. If we lose, great. It sucks, whatever. But the next day, we got to go to practice again. We got to start at the gym again. And so we
Mm.
do the same thing regardless. And so that
Mm.
recognition that you're going to take the same actions regardless.
Yeah.
You're going to,
Exactly.
but even if you
Yeah.
didn't get the Fulbright, guess what? You would have still been, you would have
Mm.
still found a way to impact people in the way that you hope to impact people. So it really doesn't make a difference in terms of the outcomes. Yes, are there benefits? Absolutely. But again, it really, you're going to continue down that road. So the
Yeah.
stress,
Yeah.
anxiety, gone. Yeah.
And related to that, like it's just very important to not take it as a process or as an outcome that will validate how good you are and what you can do. Just don't take it as a validation whether you get the scholarship or not, that you're good or bad at what you do. That's really not what it is about. Focus on the process. The outcome is not completely in your own hands. And if it doesn't happen the first time, it can happen the second time. It can happen with another scholarship. You know? So yeah.
And I'll end on this. Thank you so much, Valera. But I will end on
Thank
this
you
one.
so much. Mm.
There's a so people say life is like chess, right? The board
Mm.
game. And other people make the comparison of life to poker. So in poker, it's not all chance and it's not all skill, but somewhere in between. And so I tell students this all the time. I say, well, essentially, maybe 10% is in your control and 90% is outside of your control. Or maybe it's 90% is about the effort, the skill, the hard work, and 10% is an element of chance. You don't know where things are in any given situation. Life
Mm.
is complex. There are too many variables, too many moving parts. So many other people applying
Mm.
with stories. It matters who reads your.
Exactly. It's thousands
What
of applicants.
did they eat? Did they have a good breakfast that day? Did they get in a fight with
Yeah.
their spouse that day? You have no idea. There's so many variables. There's so much outside of your control, and then there's stuff in your control. I tell students,
Mm.
you don't know what percentage is what, but you do know that you want to maximize what is in your control. So thinking about that
Exactly.
is super important. Any last words, Blair? Thank you so much for being on here with me and sharing your insights with all of our students.
Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful.